Hello, fellow plate spinners. I'm really glad you're here for your weekly dose of authenticity and joy. I'm Selena Johnson and your guide through this chaos of busy lives. In each episode, we unpack real tools to conquer overwhelm and dodge burnout. It's all about creating space for what truly matters. Whether it be through solo reflections or inspiring guests, this is your sanctuary for a more centered, productive you, with a healthy serving of that joy we talked about. Get ready to hit pause on life while we dive in to some real chats. Hope you enjoy. Okay, A is for agency. I'm just going to get right on into it. This episode is going to be all about the letter A in pause. So again, I'm going to repeat this each time. If you just happen to click on A, you really need to go back and listen to the earlier episodes describing pause, and then P comes before A. So you get the idea. A is for agency. So let's talk about this. This is probably the key. So as you're going through the experience of pausing, pause is an acronym that has a letter for each thing. And it really is my tool, my process that I've used for the last few years to guide myself through a moment of overwhelm or burnout. And so P is for pausing and praying and like really taking a moment to stop, right? But A is for reminding yourself of what you have agency over. So often when we feel overwhelmed or burnt out or on the brink of burnout, we are dumping everything into a bucket. And we're grabbing things that maybe aren't even for us, right? So we're just saying, oh, like we have all been there where you've got the emails coming in and then all of a sudden you're like, and I need to do laundry when I get home. And what are we having for dinner tonight? And that person over there is upset right now. I need to probably go check in with them. And like you start just dumping every single thing that comes into your brain into this bucket. That's the best way to describe it. And you're not compartmentalizing, which we're going to get to. That's going to come through the process. But first, what we have to do in that moment is we have to remind ourselves of what we actually have control over, because you're putting yourself in a state of being responsible for everything. That's really with overwhelm. What's happening is you're not stopping long enough or thoughtfully enough to like think like, okay, what is really for me to do right now? We're going to get to that dissection process. But first, we have to remind ourselves of what we are actually in control of. So the things that you are in control of, you are in control of stopping and compartmentalizing that. That is up to you. You are in control of your attitude, right? Attitude is such a huge part of this is your, I don't know about you. I'm actually going to talk about myself here is when I am in that state, the one of the triggers that I have, or one of the indicators I have, we've talked about, is I'll become short with people, or I become frustrated or easily angered, right? These are things that are really natural for me when I'm in that state of dumping everything into a bucket. And I spent years, probably having really high cortisol levels because I would always be in this state of overwhelm. And when I really spent years thinking it was everyone else. Everyone else is putting these responsibilities on me. No one else is doing what I need them to do. If people would just listen to me, this would go a lot smoother. I mean, I spent way too long in that headspace. And although I didn't always say it out loud, it lived in me. And that counts, you guys. How you're talking within your body it matters. And so whether you're somebody who just is like always putting on a good face like I did, or somebody who's maybe outwardly frustrated or angry, I want to remind you that your attitude plays a huge part in this. And the reason I love pause is because, so often we would hear this, like, just count to 10. But when we count to 10, often, that's like the pause part of it, the stopping part of it. But often there's so much after that we aren't dealing with. And I know for me, I would count to 10 and I'd come out of it and I'd just be like, yeah, okay, back to what I really need everyone to be doing in order for me to feel better. And the fact is I have so much control over that space of my heart and my mind. I have control over how I'm feeding my mind. So, and often that's why I say pause and pray, because inviting him into that space, inviting God into that piece of me that could so easily become jaded and resentful, that I need his grace and his mercy. And, really, I have the power to I have so much agency over like what I turn on and what I listen to and how I talk to myself. That's all stuff I have control over. We also have agency over the example in which we're setting for others. So often my motivator is not necessarily in that moment, because sometimes it can become too much to really like, I don't know how to say, like, talk nice to yourself. Like sometimes you're just in a space, right? But I do have a huge motivator in how I am living an example in front of my children, or living an example in front of coworkers. Like I want to be a shining light. I want to be somebody who they see God in. And I have control over that. I have control over how I show up in the world. And I used to do this thing where I would, when I was feeling overwhelmed, it's very silly, but if you take your index and your thumb on both hands, so you have to have your hands free to do this, but you take your index and your thumb on both hands and you put your two indexes together and you put your two thumbs together and you can make a diamond, right? So I used to do this before I ever came up with the pause process. This was my mechanism of reminding myself of what I have control over. And I think it's funny now because I didn't have enough tools to really put it to words, but now I see what I was doing, which is I was giving myself that permission to not be in control of everything around me. And so if you take your index and your thumb and you make a diamond, this is what I used to say, and I love to remind myself of, is like I can make the diamond big, or I can make this space small. Like this is sometimes all I've got, is this space right here. And the rest outside of it maybe isn't for me to fix in this moment. And I don't know about you, but what has come with pause for me with the letter A is this relief, this weight lifted off of me, that it is not all up to me. In fact, it's not all up to you. It's up to God, and it's up to us to give him space. If I am trying to jump in and fix everything before it needs to be fixed, or I'm trying to jump in and do the thing for my kids because I want it done a certain way, I'm not allowing him space to serve other people and to show them how to do things. And so really stopping long enough and reminding myself of what I have control over allows me like a moment of, yeah, okay, I'm not the master of the universe. There's only one. And I'm not the one that needs to take all of this responsibility on. Again, we're going to talk about what we do with all those things we put in the bucket. But I want us to remind ourselves, there's like, I always kind of think of it like 3 areas. So you have the area in which, the big circle in which you have control, right? We just talked about the things you have control over: your attitude, your reactions, your plan. You have control over that. You have control over that space. And then you've got the control over influence, right? So you have control over, like I said, the example you're setting for people. You have control over, the words you use, how you're showing up, and how you're creating space around you for other people, right? So you have like an influence bubble. And I think of that as a little bit smaller than the control bubble. Like I have control over the things I choose to influence, okay? Now, how that other person receives my influence or decides for themselves, I'm sure I had a lot of mentors who were giving me great examples when I was in that really, really awful space. But when I came out of that space, I could see like, the truth and the answers that were kind of sitting in front of me, right? So that's like your influence bubble is a little bit smaller. You may not have control over how it's received, but you do have control over how you're putting it out into the universe. And then you have the smallest bubble, which is control over other people. And it's not a bubble at all. Like I would say maybe the smallest piece of that is like you at certain ages with your children, you can tell them what to do, right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Or like, I do have, I'm in the workplace. So if I give guidance or, set expectations, that needs to be, those are boundaries that I'm setting. But I don't have control over how the other person adheres to them. I don't have control over my child's response to it. So it's still a very small bubble, but it's there. So you have what you have control over, you have your influence, and then you have this little space there where, you have to remind yourself, like, that's for other people. That's for them. to work through. And your job is to, again, set boundaries or parameters, but you don't actually have control over the other people. So I just want to remind us here, like really sticking to that big bubble and the influence bubble, that's your space. That's the space that's going to take the weight off and help you feel like going into this next step, which we're going to talk about in the next episode. You're going to have so much more, I guess, perspective on what really is going to be for you to move forward with and what is going to be for you to set aside. So we'll talk about that next episode. But this was A for agency. Super important that you take that time to remember what you have agency over. And isn't it a beautiful thing that we have so much that we can have control over that is more impactful than the things that we grab all day long. All right, that's it. On to the next episode. Thank you for listening. I'm just so grateful that you would take the time to be here with me today. I hope that if there's anything that inspired you or got you excited, that you would share it to social media or send me a message with any input or feedback that you have. And just really appreciate the support and the encouragement that I get from you guys all the time. I will keep showing up, and I hope you keep listening.